Senate that have the power to send children of other parents, but not their own children, off to die or be injured in a senseless war.
Perpetual victim, and they have the eternal right to self-defense. And I think American citizens in general have been kind of the last ones to wake up. Well, we're the last ones to wake up to a lot of stuff, right? The fact that our government is committing a lot of genocide and backing a lot of genocide and atrocities around the world. But
Excuse the room here, it's a little bit messy. So I just wanted to introduce this next live stream that we're doing, which is about Robert Kagan, who's an awful neocon who helped get us into the war in Iraq. He's written this article, which is not too bad. It's in the Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, and that's kind of hideous too, but we can't be very picky right now with this particular article anyway. And he talks about Donald Trump and the imminent disaster that is going to befall us in 2024, which is going to cause a major constitutional crisis. And so we wanted to go through this article by Robert Kagan to point out some of the, it's a well-written article, and hence that's why I'm choosing it. And hat tip to Lauren Steiner, who had talked about this, and I may even pop in a little bit of a snippet from her site, her video about it. Diddy and I were going to talk about this, and the reason where I'm not doing many pre-recorded videos is because we don't have time. It's spring and there's a lot to do, and we've got different things going on as well as what's happening in the property, so we don't really I don't really have time to actually sit and do pre-recorded stuff. So I hope that that's okay with people, that it's just sort of on the sort of flying by the seat of one's pants and discussing some of these things, these articles, etc. That's Nandi in the background. He has to always check out when I'm in this room, and as I said, please excuse, we're fixing it up and also arranging some computers and stuff in here, and so it's a little bit messy. So anyway, this is what we're going to talk about, so stay tuned, and thank you for the people that have been joining in the live streams in the last few days. We always enjoy your company, and we always enjoy your comments and your points of view, even when they might disagree. We're not into trolly stuff particularly, but we always enjoy people's comments. And so anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll get into this article. Hi friends, so we're back again to talk about, Didi and I, to talk about this article that I mentioned in this pre-recorded introduction from Robert Kagan, unfortunate neocon warmonger, but he actually wrote a pretty interesting article in the awful Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos. But it's always interesting to see, if somebody's written a good article, we'll just forget about the fact that he's a warmonger. And anyway, so I wanted to share something by Lauren Steiner. She's done an analysis of that, a very brief sort of analysis of that Robert Kagan article, and so I thought that was interesting. So we might play some of that, and also she's talking to Jordan Chariton about it, and so and then after I play that, then we're going to just share about 4 different excerpts of the article, and then just do a brief little commentary on that, and then that'll be it. So it's just going to be fairly short, this one. Hi Jean, hi Holly. So anyway, we'll just share some of Lauren Steiner's.
To talk about this article by Robert Kagan, who, speaking of neocons, is a disgusting neocon, one of the ones responsible for the Iraq War. Oh, yeah. But he wrote a surprisingly good article. It was an opinion piece in the Washington Post that I shared with you. And I thought it backed up with a lot of facts and a lot of good analysis what's going on. And certain things that I've been on the fence about for 4 years is Trump just an authoritarian, or is he an actual fascist? And what this article, and I'm just going to read through, because I made some brief, I just tried to hit the summary points. I'll just go through it. He basically says that Trump will be the candidate in 2024. There's no doubt about it. He says the GOP is already rewriting voting laws. They are axing impartial Secretary of States, shifting control to the legislatures, which they're turning Republican. He says this is going to lead to chaos and violence. If Trump doesn't win, they're going to challenge the election. There's going to be another insurrection. He says what the Democrats are doing right now is appeasement, and they're underestimating the fascist nature of this. He's saying it's a crisis in the democracy, the constitutional democracy. Now, I know we on the left say that we don't have a real democracy. We have an oligarchy because, the government and the politics are run by the wealthy. But he's basically talking about our whole system of constitutional democracy being destroyed. He says the founders didn't see the crisis because they didn't see parties. And the GOP right now is kowtowing to Trump because he or did kowtow to him because he implemented their priorities, which were all these conservative justices, cracking down on immigrants, deregulating businesses, reducing taxes on the wealthy. And the founders didn't see that this party solidarity transcend. He said what they saw was the separation of powers would keep our democracy, but they didn't see that the party solidarity transcends that. He didn't foresee members of Congress or the judiciary not checking members of their own party. And we already see what's happened to, the Supreme Court. He says that Trump supporters are not ordinary Republicans. They see Trump laugh in the face of people And that's what they like about him. He says there's a stronger bond between the leader and followers than any other movement, any other political movement in our entire.
I thought this was a really good, like her, what she's saying here and what Robert Kagan has been saying, I think is actually really true. It's not even about anything Trump hasn't done, whether he failed in his first term, how he handled COVID, any of those issues. It's really about him. It's almost like he's like the public, his followers, like transitional object almost. It's like they see themselves in him, and when he says F you to anybody, that and basically laughs in the face of whomever, and whatever, they see themselves as doing that through him. It's like basically, and we all know that everything that's happened, decades and decades of basically a duopoly that's really just one big party, and basically they're serving corporations and not the people. This has led eventually to Trump. I mean, it's not like suddenly he's some aberration, but we all know that. Anybody who sort of follows politics and knows, and sees the Democratic Party and the GOP for what they are and how closely they basically prop one another up, and it's all theatre. That's led to this sort of dissatisfaction with the public, and later on in this, Lauren's going to talk about how it's surprising the demographics of the people who were at the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol building, which, by the way, was kind of, you could say, is an inside job. That's for another discussion. But Abby Martin and Mike Preisner talked about that in their podcast, Empire Files podcast. That's on Patreon. You can see a great analysis of that, how it was an inside job, and there was knowledge of the Pentagon and the Capitol Hill police and all of that. That these protesters were allowed to get so close to the building, and then of course get into the building and all that kind of thing. So that was sort of just an excuse eventually to bring in more surveillance, to bring in more draconian measures, to, all these disasters are always used by governments to bring in further oppressive measures. But anyway, that's getting off the track. But anyway, Lauren Steiner sort of talks about the demographics of who was at the Capitol insurrection, and that's really kind of fascinating. But anyway, I'll just start. Did you have anything to say about that, Didi?
I just wanted to say that
she's too busy typing.
Yeah,
Go on, Didi.
I just wanted to say that I think it's one of the U.S. is one of the least democratic countries in any that purport to be a democracy. Their system is incredibly archaic. It hasn't been updated really since the revolution, when it was a confederation of independent states. It's a mess. I mean, their electoral college system is crazy. Yeah. The fact that people's votes cannot count, the whole system of states things, the whole duopoly system, instead of having some sort of recognition that there are other, something to make a third party or even minority parties possible. I mean, it's like there is no possibility, really, almost. I mean, it's barely possible to have some sort of minority representation. But really, I mean, the way it's set up, and their system with funding of electoral stuff, the system of
super PACs and all of that.
Super PACs and all of that is just, it's crazy. And of course, the corporations have so much power, and the lobbyists have so much power. It's insane.
What disturbs me is how he's basically, in his first term, he's installed all these judges that are going to help him, and this is where she's going to talk about that a bit more. And he's sort of set it up so in some ways if he gets in, and if there's another contest of he didn't win or whatever, he's going to be able to sort of flip it in his favor, and then I don't know if they're going to be able to get rid of him, particularly if the army and the if the defense forces and the National Guard, etc., if they are with him on this. It's definitely going to be, and the Christian Dominionists have infiltrated the military, and they want Trump. The Christian fascists kind of see Trump as a way to what they always wanted was to basically govern, and so if they are with him on this, it's almost going to be impossible to get rid of him, and it will be a real coup d'etat. With the military involved, because if you don't have the military and all of that, if the military just drops out, then you've kind of lost everything basically. So
I think one of the things with that is that absolutely, Trump has been trying, and the DNC has been trying to rig the elections so that they can have complete dominance, and particularly their attempts to subvert basically the GOP for the last decade or more has subverted the parliamentary or the legislative system. They've been subverting the executive system. The U.S. is supposed to have three branches that are independent: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And they're all supposed to work together and work as counterbalances. But the executive has given itself more and more and more power to do stuff without the will of the Congress, including going to war, which they've done again and again. The legislature, the way the GOP works, which is just to do nothing, to completely try and block everything the Democrats propose, and to try and subvert.
They have their own. I don't want to get into all that.
I just want to get into it a little bit
Yeah.
and say, it makes it so that unless the Democrats have control of both houses of Parliament, you end up with these huge roadblocks.
But they still fritter away their majority. They do it all the time. Obama did it.
Yeah,
and
sure.
They're doing it
DNC,
now, but they're using Manchin and Sinema as an excuse.
One of the things I've heard said often is, why don't the Democrats do what the Republicans do and give more power to the executive and just do stuff by executive order? But that's, again, subverting the system. And then they've subverted the legislative, the judicial system by, Trump openly talked about stacking courts.
Yeah.
So, in terms of their balances of power, it's gone already. And what you're saying about, Trump and the GOP are obvious, Trump particularly, is obviously working to dominate the system and stay in power.
Yeah.
Including create riots and try and actually create coups. Now, the military, I don't think, is with him. I think the issue with the Dominionists is a real issue. But the problem is that if Trump does that kind of fascist move to try and take over, and the only reason he can't is because of the military, well, then the military end up declaring a state of emergency, and then you've got a military coup.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's no guarantee that they're going to return anything to anything.
Yeah.
So it's fascism either way.
Yeah, just by the sounds of what's happening in the GOP, going by this article, it's a mess. It's a total mess, and he's got so much support too from the public that they have just kind of people in the GOP have just kind of relinquished their any sort of say in things to him. So it's really Trump's party now. And anyway, but we'll just play some more here. Just hold on a sec.
Country, and he goes through some other movements. He says even Reagan had people criticize him when he failed to deliver, but what Trump delivers is himself. And
And one more thing, like Chris Hedges talks about the permanent lie. I mean, all these different parties, they all just, say all this stuff that's not true, and they talk about other countries, which really, if they held up a mirror, what they say about other countries is exactly what the US is doing. But I mean, Trump just, I cannot even imagine what the debates are going to be like if Trump is the nominee for the GOP. I can't even imagine what that's going to be like, because if it's either Kamala Harris or if it's it can't be Biden, because he'll completely wipe the floor and hang him out to dry, and Kamala Harris, he'll do the same thing. So I mean, I just sort of see, and particularly how they've squandered any political capital, the Democratic Party, as they always do. They're going to end up, it's going to end up Trump as in 2024, or if they don't want Trump, if the unelected government, the deep state, doesn't want Trump, I'm sure there'll be actual competent fascists. But if it is Trump, which it probably will be, I don't know. It's just I can't even imagine what the debate would be like. Anyway, well, I'll just play some more and
he says, and I'm just going to read a couple paragraphs because I think these are salient. Trump is different, which is one reason the political system has struggled to understand, much less contain him. The American liberal worldview tends to search for material and economic explanations for everything. And no doubt a good number of Trump supporters have grounds to complain about their lot in life. But their bond with Trump has little to do with economics or other material concerns. They believe the U.S. government and society have been captured by socialists, minority groups, and sexual deviants. They see the Republican Party establishments as corrupt and weak, losers, to use Trump's word. Unable to challenge the reigning liberal hegemony, they view Trump as strong and defiant, willing to take on the establishment, Democrats, rhinos, liberal media, Antifa, the Squad, big tech, and the Mitch McConnell Republicans. His charismatic leadership has given millions of Americans a feeling of purpose and empowerment, a new sense of identity. While Trump's critics see him as too narcissistic to be any kind of leader, his supporters admire his unapologetic militant selfishness. Unlike establishment Republicans, Trump speaks without embarrassment on behalf of an aggrieved segment of Americans, not exclusively white, who feel they've been taking it on the chin for too long, and that's all he needs to do.
And what's amazing about Trump is that, it's so sad that people actually have hitched their wagon to someone who just lies like a rug and doesn't care one iota. It's about the public. I mean, talk about Stockholm syndrome, and I find him personally the most uncharismatic figure. I mean, of all the people, that are probably going to take the United States into full-on fascism, it has to be this ex-reality TV host that lies like a rug and changes their story from one day to the next and doesn't care. I mean, if they ever get another pandemic in the United States, I mean, I can't even imagine. But I just kind of feel like this is, I have to be honest and say, I feel like this, if he gets in again, of course, we're already heading towards sort of disaster with the climate crisis. But if he gets in again, it's sort of game over, because I don't think people are going to be able to get him out. There's going to be no way he's going to do anything at all. Not that Biden is doing anything, but there is going to be absolutely no way he's going to do anything to stop this climate crisis, climate emergency that's coming. So, I mean, and it's just approaching. It's like we're heading towards a brick wall, and so I mean, it's just incredibly sad, isn't it, Dee Dee?
Yeah, it is. And the thing to really note is that, the United States hasn't been democratic for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Hasn't had any skerrick of democracy. Yeah. The way the duopoly works and the oligopoly works, I mean, and it's been getting worse. Yeah. I mean, the progressive move towards fascism has been something that has been facilitated by both parties.
That's right.
Over decades now. And the constant imperialism, it really, I mean, this started with the Spanish-American War, started really before the Spanish-American War, but I mean, it went full-on imperialist with the Spanish-American War. It was the U.S. picking up as much as it could of empires after the First World War and after the Second World War, consolidating their power, and they believe that they are beyond any kind of criticism, beyond any kind of basically nobody can control them. They do what they want. I mean, look at the sanctions that they're doing around the world. They're not sanctions. Sanctions are to be agreed upon.
Well, they're acts of war.
They're actually war. They're economic warfare, and they're unilateral, and they are imposed on the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And they think they can get away with that, and mostly they do.
The U.S. national security state, though, that is in total control of everything that's happening. I mean, well, if Trump gets in and they're not happy with Trump, they will find a way to get rid of him. If he doesn't get in, I mean, you know, if they are not happy with him, they could end up knocking him off too. It's like
They could knock him off and put in somebody like Eric Prince. You know.
Yeah, they could do that.
I tend to think that he would make a good fascist for them.
Whatever happens in the future in relation to him, if he gets in, it'll be what the U.S. national security state want, and if they don't want him, like, I mean, when he got in the first time and he started mucking with the CIA, which was a big, you know, I mean, look at Kennedy when Kennedy talked about dispersing the CIA. I mean, when Trump started mucking about with the CIA and disparaging them, as Chuck Schumer said, you know, they have 7 ways till Sunday, the CIA, to mess with someone. And so, you know, and so I think he learned his lesson pretty quickly, because I feel, you know, it seems like part of the Russiagate narrative was fucking with him, basically. I mean, it started with Hillary Clinton and her fuck-ups and stuff, but, you know, so anyway, it's all really ultimately in the hands of, you know, the U.S. national security state, who's going to stay in power and what's going to happen.
Okay, I wanted to just say, I think it's a mistake to think that the U.S. security state or the CIA is a monolith. There are factions within it, and I think you know, if you get enough people who may be swayed to the Trump side, it's just like the dominionists within the military. I mean, yes, there are people who are very senior in the military who are not going along with that, thank God. But and that's
are they?
ironic.
Who knows, though? You know how you know how they protest because they want, you know, it's for show. Oh, you know, we wanted to. You know, Trump was talking about invading China or dropping a nuke on them, and we did. You know, but they're actually the ones that were in control the whole time. With you know, he left it in their hands, the generals and stuff.
I think there's that thing though, but one of the more disturbing things is the fact that the U.S. has not only, you know, done all of the work to, you know, try and undermine any kind of whistleblowers, undermine any kind of accurate news, do the surveillance state, and all of this sort of stuff, but the U.S. has also been pushing the creation of a fascist public, with the, you know, destruction of their education system, with the, you know, pushing of nationalism, the pushing of patriotism. You know, the USA, it's no different than Sieg Heil.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
really.
That's true. Yeah.
And the really disturbing thing, and the reason Trump is such a problem, is because he's not in the GOP's control. Yeah, he's got that base that they have created, that mass
he's totally
proto-fascist base.
He's totally his own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, the GOP is just a vehicle for him. Anyway, so we'll just play a little bit more. Oh, and I just wanted to, we'll have a look at the comments in a second. Sorry.
Dan's awake. He's here.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Dan.
But
I agree.
I don't know about
Jen and Holly have been having a great discussion.
I don't know about folks I don't know about folks in the chat, but when Trump got in, I just noticed people were white knuckling it those whole 4 years, because you never knew. It's like being in a dysfunctional family with full on like psychopathic parents, and you didn't know what they were going to do from one day to the next. And honestly, as much as it was exhausting. Didn't you find that, Didi, that it was absolutely exhausting?
I did find it exhausting, and one of the most, like there's always been this tendency. It's like I was saying, the proto-fascist, population has been being pushed for decades, and it's bearing fruit now. And so when Trump could say, encourage and embolden the police, I said, go get this guy.
Yeah, Michael Reynolds.
And they knocked him off just like that.
Yes, he was.
Well, that's completely fascist. That's a death squad.
Yeah, and that's the scary thing toward the end of his term. Like
and the police go along with that.
Things like Michael Reynolds, when he bragged about, when one of his speeches about, it was over in 15 minutes, and basically got the police to assassinate a U.S. citizen, which they're killing black people, 3 every day or something like that. This is like, he was bragging about it, the president of the United States, bragging about killing Michael Reynolds and doing it in 15 minutes. And I think there's going to be a lot more of that. I think it's going to be really fucking scary. I think he's just going to see this whole thing as a mandate, and he knows that they won't be able to get rid of him because he's stacked to the judicial system, and it's going to be really difficult to get rid of him. And I think he's just going to go for it, and that's really scary. And I really fear for United States citizens, because I think it's going to make the first term look like a party. Anyway, we'll just have some more from.
And he says that 90% of these Republicans that were at the January 6th thing were not tied to groups. Most of them were middle class and middle age. 40% were business owners or white collar workers. They came from purple counties, not red counties. And he said that they are not going to observe the norms like Gore did when the Supreme Court stole the election from him, and he stepped down. They're willing to do things as part of a mass movement that they won't do as individuals. And we know how that psychology works. And he says all the Republicans fell in line, the donors, the conservative pundits, the opponents. And he basically, solution is that Romney needs to do something, that Romney and Collins and all those other people need to do something. They need to work with Democrats to prevent these legislators from overturning the next election. So I was really, alarmed by this article because it was so well documented, and I agreed with his analysis. And I always have been on the cusp as to whether what Trump represents is fascism or not. And I wanted to know, sorry to take so long, but I did want to summarize it because the Washington Post is on a paywall. I happen to subscribe to it, not because I want to support Bezos, but because I want to see what's in there. What did you think of that article when you read it?
I have a very difficult time saying anything nice about Robert Kagan. However, I think a lot of what he said is accurate. I actually have seen a lot of what he's talking about on the ground. I talked about earlier why I just kind of sucked it up and voted for Biden.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I watched Status Coup. Jordan Chariton is one of the co-founders of Status Coup, along with Jen Dyes. And I saw some of the on-the-ground reporting he was doing during these Trump gatherings. And by the way, I just want to be clear that we don't see Trump as an aberration. We don't see the GOP as some horrible party and that the Democratic Party is fine or anything. I mean, the United States has had the 14 defining characteristics of fascism for a very long time. And the duopoly is just one big party, and it's all theater, and they just kind of serve corporate overlords, basically. But we're focusing on
Vidal's words. There's one party in the United States, and it has two right wings: the Democrats and the Socialists.
Yeah, exactly.
And the Democrats and the.
So we just want to be clear about that. That we're totally not into the whole lesser evil business. But when Jordan Chariton was at the doing these reports from these Trump rallies, and he also just people on the street. I mean, the level of sort of the level of aggression and hate, but there was that, but there was also people were absolutely, you could tell that they had enough. They were really over it, and I think it was like they grabbed the first one that looked like they were going to stir shit up in a big way, and they didn't. I don't think they even care. I don't like this article says, it's not even about what he does or says or anything. They see that he's flying in the face of all the bullshit that they've had to put up with.
They love the fact that he's outrageous.
What's that?
They love the fact that he's outrageous
and that he's thumbing his nose at everybody and laughing in the face. It's sort of like almost like it's almost got a tinge of acceleration. It's like, just let the whole thing go to fucking shit. You know what I mean? And you know that saying that I kind of really like this saying, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn the village down to feel its warmth. And I feel like that's an African proverb. And I feel like a lot of the public, and like Lauren Steiner said about that article, there is a lot of different kinds of people, black people, Latinx, and all different ages. There was white collar workers, all different demographics in that Capitol insurrection. And there are people who are just they've had enough of this broken, corrupt system, and it's almost like a bit of a burning it down kind of an attitude, in that regard. And they've just caught the first sort of, he's far from an ideal candidate. He's not bright. You couldn't really say that Donald Trump is bright. He could barely string sentences together, and heavens knows what he'll be like in 3 years' time. But I mean, and he can't hold a story, can't keep a story straight. But anyway,
he doesn't need to.
No, he doesn't need to, because they don't care.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, he may be very overtly, people can see he's lying, but then Biden lies all the time too. He just does it in a pretty way and pretends like he cares about, sort of LGBT people and this and that. They do that feigning of the weaponizing of identity politics and stuff. Anyway, we'll just play some more of this.
Yeah.
Particularly because of the transformation I saw from 2016 to 2020. Not that in 2016 Trump wasn't dangerous or saying crazy things, but to me it was mostly a circus element. People were poo-pooing at the media, this and that, but to me back then it wasn't full on yet, kind of tinges of the 1930s and 40s. And the stuff I was seeing on the campaign trail this year, particularly at the end, some of these I remember the last rally I covered was like 10,000 people in Pennsylvania without masks at the height of the pandemic, and Trump kind of talking like Hitler. I mean, I was very careful not to compare him to Hitler, because I think comparisons to Hitler get tossed around, but that's what it sounded like to me. Added onto it, just the explosion of the conspiracy movement. I mean, at this rally, they had a massive TV screen with OANN segments on it, and it was really chilling, just watching just this sea of massless people just thriving on, being reckless with their health. Trump was throwing a lot of red meat.
I actually sort of wonder if he's going to actually, because the corporate media have been attacking him, even Fox News was having a bit of a go at him too, during that whole time, and they did that Russiagating, constantly lies about the whole Russia. There was so many things they could have gotten Trump on, so many things he did, the genocide in Yemen, assassinating Qasem Soleimani, all those different things. There could have been so many things, but no, they invented a Russiagate narrative, and he was the victim of that the whole time. And I really wonder if he's going to really take revenge. If he gets entrenched and he feels like he's not going to be tossed out, I really wonder if he's going to end up getting rid in some way, or having some way of fucking with all those different, like CNN and MSNBC and all of that, and have his own news network, which is like the OAN, that just does favorable stuff about Trump. I mean, it's amazing. That news, news network.
I think they will absolutely go that way. I think he'll use any of this censorship and stuff that's kind of come up to try and eliminate fake news, and he'll just declare the whole lot of it fake news that isn't propaganda.
Oh yes, and this is the other thing. He'll probably take revenge on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, who've been fucking with him basically. I mean, I just thought, I mean, I was, I'm no fan of Trump, but I thought that was outrageous.
Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I thought that was outrageous that they got rid of him. from those social media platforms to get rid of. It just shows the power of the surveillance state of Silicon Valley, that they could just get rid of an historical document too. I mean, here he is yammering on Twitter. That's like a historical document. I don't even know if they returned that. But I mean, that's outrageous that they got rid of him. And the left was, not the left, the fake left, was cheering it on that he was banned. They cheered on Alex Jones when he was blocked and banned. I mean, the cheering on of censorship by the fake left, I'm talking about the corporate Dems and the Democratic Party ideologues and stuff, just so sad. And I think it's going to be really ugly if he can find a way of fucking with social media platforms. He's going to do it. So I think it's going to come back to bite these different arrogant, sort of like Jack Dorsey and Zuckerberg and all of this is going to come back, I think, to bite them in the ass if he gets, if he manages to feel like he's confident enough that he can do shit. Excuse me.
I think he will be confident enough because he's got the mass of people behind him. I mean, that's why he can get away with thumbing his nose at the entire GOP and just screwing them. And he can get away with it because he does have that mass of people. And I mean, that kind of whole push towards fascism really started, I think, well, I mean, it was there before that, but you really saw it with the Palmer raids, in the 20s, where they invented un-Americanism and that whole, but it's just gotten worse and worse, and pushing the racism and pushing, and they're excellent at using CONTILPRO and using the media, particularly the digital media, and to invent all kinds of garbage. I mean, QAnon was a great, lot of nonsense. But you've got all these groups. I mean, I can't believe how many people believe literally in the Bible and are supporting these sort of dominionists who want to take over the government. And although Trump is absolutely nothing like what any Christian would want to see, their belief that somehow he is a messenger, a tool of God. And so they're all behind him.
But
it's insane.
When they did that blocking of Trump and all of that, and they got rid of different right-wing people and stuff. They drove them underground.
Hi, Tom.
They drove them underground, and now you can't. You could since then. You don't know what the hell's going on. You don't know what they're doing, what they're talking about. You don't know if the FBI is egging people on, as they do. They tend to find the most unhinged people and kind of get them. Like, I mean, look at that Michigan governor. I think it was Michigan, where part of those people that were planning to kidnap her were FBI informants, FBI associated with the FBI. So it's just sort of like all they've done is with all these blocking and banning and stuff is just drive people underground, and now we don't know what's going on. Anyway, we'll play some more of this.
About the other kind of this white replacement theory kind of stuff.
Hey, Tom.
So to me, you mix that, and I do think a lot of those people, believe it or not, from what I've seen, at the base of it, there is some economic frustration because a lot of them have had jobs sent away, things like that. But that's not the only reason they're acting like this. That's kind of a base, and we saw this in Nazi Germany, this and that, with economic anger, lack of security economically, really feeds people into blaming somebody and looking to the other and being very susceptible to, nationalism, white supremacy, that kind of thing. So when you couple that, which is exploding, I think Trump has kind of reignited the white people, the aggrieved white man's last stand in America. I think that's what the Trump era is.
Although I've seen so many African-American and Latino Trump supporters, it's not even funny.
Most of the things I've been to, that has been minimal. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it.
Yeah.
But it is, by the way, it hasn't really been discussed. Trump did better. I mean, 4% better among black voters, 6% better than Hispanic voters. You could say that's not a lot. I mean, that's a lot for a Republican spewing the things Trump spews. But I think in Kagan's article, the thing that really I think people should take seriously is the things that are underway, which is, Arizona, for example, their legislature trying to change the law to basically that they could basically invalidate the Secretary of State in elections. if they don't like the Secretary of State,
Right.
Their decision of what they confirm. Other state legislatures trying to basically take power away from the governor, the Secretary of State, so that the legislators, in this case, Republicans, can basically decide to toss away the electors. And then if you think what we saw with January, if they do that, and if you think what we saw January 6th will be child's play compared to what happens with that. So I think it is extremely dangerous, those things that are going on. I see what Ron DeSantis is doing in Florida with the COVID stuff. We also have to add in, and I don't think Kagan mentioned this, but under Trump, Mitch McConnell ran through an unprecedented amount of right-wing federal judges. So if state legislatures are going to change their laws to basically take power away from the Secretary of State and the governor when it comes to certifying elections, and they could take it on, and then you have all these right-wing judges, rubber stamped by Mitch McConnell, and then you have a right-wing Supreme Court, it could be a real coup by the Republicans. So I actually agree with him. I don't particularly know what Mitt Romney, Susan Collins, and that gang could do, because Republicans don't really listen. Republican voters don't care.
No, he's saying they could join. They could join with the Democrats and give the Democrats a majority to.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. Like one of the things about this whole thing is the issue of the 2022 election. Typically, like with Obama, the Democrats have gotten in for two years. They make a complete shit show of it. They do fuck all.
Yeah.
And people get really pissy with them. Yeah. And so the midterm elections, the Republicans sweep in.
Yeah.
And they sweep in not only federally, but in state.
Yeah.
And, that's going to set it up. I mean, you think they're mucking with the laws now to try and change voting laws and stuff. You wait till after the next election.
Yeah.
To not let Republicans do this with the election laws. And also he said it was smart to take out some elements of the, not the PRO Act, because that's the Workers Act, the one about HR 1, that was all of these. They said, leave gerrymandering aside, leave ethics aside, all these other things aside, and just get the stuff that's going to affect the voting and the election into the reconciliation bill. So we'll see if that happens.
Well, I also think at the end of the day, I mean, what are you waiting for? The Supreme Court already stole the presidential election 20 years ago. So it's not like, maybe that wasn't fascist, but that was obviously a coup in itself. So it obviously there's precedent for Republicans to steal an election. Now they're just making it more systematic across the states, where state by state they're trying to get rid of these election heads in county positions, this and that, and put in their stooges or Trumpies. So I certainly think, I think Biden, the Democrats need to actually exert some muscle here. I don't quite know what they could do other than Romney and these folks. I mean, you need 10 votes from the Republicans to break a filibuster. I don't know if there's 10 votes from Republicans, but to me, I've always said this, there needs to be one uniform federal election system, not state by state by state, because that's a huge part of the problem why you're seeing all this nonsense. There should be each state on the same exact federal election rules, guidelines, the same exact ways that they're certified. The fact that you have all of these states with different rules, kind of the same thing with COVID, by the way, is part of why you have chaos and the ability for Republicans to try and systematically rig it.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't really know much about United States electoral politics and how, elections, all the ins and outs of the whole thing. Probably, Holly and others in the chat probably know more about that than I do, so I'm not going to comment on that. But he's right about, the very every state seems to have its own. It's almost like I often see the United States as almost like all these different countries in one country, because they all function at in a different way. They have these incredible, some are incredibly bigoted, and look at how they've handled COVID. I mean, if you don't have a uniform response to COVID, you're fucked, basically. If all those states, and that's part of the shit show now, of course, that there's all these different states have different responses and stuff. Did you want to say something?
Yeah,
Judy?
well, I would say that that's absolutely right. I mean, I think the fact that they are so disparate, and that really, again, comes from the fact that the U.S. political system is based on the 13 original colonies, which were a confederation of separate states. I mean, they didn't really start having federal troops or anything like that until Lincoln. I mean, people don't realize that where they overrode they put in the laws to allow that, to create a draft to have federal troops that then during the Great Train Strike and other major socialist kind of pushes, the federal the state militias were often on the side of the demonstrators and the unions, and the federal troops were used to put them down. But the federal troops came into existence out of the Civil War. And I mean, it is such a mess. The disunity.
What do you think? What do you think, Tom, about all of this? Do you think? What do I mean? I don't know. I just wonder what. Hi, Whipple-Dingle. I just sort of think I don't watch the corporate media, meaning I don't watch MSNBC and CNN and stuff, but I wonder how much they've been paying attention to how these systems and levers of power are being taken over in the last I don't know how long it's been going on, but during Trump's time and since. You really have to wonder if they pay any attention or even if they care. But I know they'll be absolutely delighted at the thought of Donald Trump maybe being elected in 2024, and also the lead up to it, because they gave him billions of dollars of free publicity before he was elected last time, and they didn't know what to do when he got voted out. They didn't know what to do with their time, and now they'll be able to spend all their time talking about Trump, and they won't have to do, not that they ever do any real news, but that'll be another excuse to just carry on like that.
And the fact that the DNC and stuff made it so difficult and undermined and actually took smaller parties, they prevented them from getting votes and things.
Tom says, just because I was late to class, you don't need to call on me first. That's hilarious. That's right. We'll just leave you standing there at the desk. And this, by the way, I'm not anyone to talk about U.S. electoral politics as far as all these different legislatures and stuff. I'm really quite clueless about that.
I have some idea.
Didi has some idea.
There,
I mean, she grew up in the United States. I don't really know much about it, and like all these recent bills and stuff, I don't know why they had to have them hooked together and all this. I don't know. It just sounds. Anyway, we'll just watch some more of this.
And the thing that's scary to me is law enforcement. There was an article today in the LA Times that said the biggest outbreaks of cases are in the LAPD and the LA Fire Department. And people are talking about quitting the force if they have to adhere to Newsom's, vaccine man, or Newsom or Biden. One of them had the vaccine man. I guess Biden, because he is for.
Said, which was it? Was it East Germany when when they basically refused to fire on the crowds or something? Yes. That's when. Yeah. That's when it was all over.
Yeah.
And so as long as the military and all of that don't join Donald Trump. But like you say,
that's why we're actually trying to work on people in the police and the military is helpful, and not just considering them the enemy.
Oh, and by the way, apparently, like Trump did a speech for the Moonies. He's courting the Moonies for money.
This is the Unification Church.
The Unification Church. That's a cult.
Which is an absolute cult. It's crazy.
And there's some other thing. He's sort of, but I mean, oh my God, it's like, imagine doing that. Courting that particular thing to get money from.
The U.S. is pushing them for propaganda purposes as an anti-Chinese thing.
And don't the Christian Dominionists see Trump as a
yeah?
What did you say
about? That's what
about?
I said. They see him as a tool of God. They don't see him as a godly man, but they see him as a tool of God. They say he's parallel to, I think it was Xerxes in the Bible, the Persian king. Yeah, like. And they've got some weird thing where they think somehow Trump is going to usher in changes that will allow them to take over the U.S.
And they're probably right.
Because
he's actually bowing
Yeah.
and scraping to anybody that will give him a lot of money and support him.
Yeah.
And he knows where his bread is buttered. I mean, he was always sort of trying to win their good graces even though he was a shit show as far as there's nothing religious about him, but
No.
he all through his term he was
one of
always,
the most venal
including
people.
that photo opportunity in front of that church with a Bible. Meanwhile, he's gassing all these non-violent protesters on the way through. I mean, you couldn't make this shit up. It's
and all the things
it's
about
right out of The
pussy,
Simpsons,
pussy
Dee Dee.
grabbing and saying I could shoot somebody in the street and everybody.
Yeah,
would be
and
fine
we were
with it.
just saying how
Yeah.
it's probably, and just for people who, we were saying I reckon it's quite true. He could shoot somebody in Fifth Avenue, and probably, I don't know. Like, I think it could get to the point where he could shoot someone in Fifth Avenue and it wouldn't be they'd find a way of excusing it.
Yeah.
Oh, he was standing his
managed
ground.
to-
Not that they have
They
stand the ground.
managed to excuse a riot that broke into the Capitol building, and with the intent of a coup, of overthrowing the government.
Whippledingle says, yeah, he can thump a Bible with the best of them.
Yeah.
He sure can. Anyway, what was I going to say? I've forgotten. Anyway, we'll just carry on with this.
And if all these local law enforcement agencies, even in democratic cities like LA, are siding with Trump, then we could be in some real trouble. So my final question on this to you is, do you think that Democratic politicians understand this danger, or are they not thinking past the next election?
You got it. The latter.
Yeah.
They're never thinking past the next election. Frankly, I think a large reason for the 3.5 trillion standoff is they need more. They need a lot of money from their donors for the midterms. So
Yeah.
the donors have a lot of leverage over this deal because they are the silent shadow that says, no. If you don't take this out, you're not getting money for next year. And
Yeah.
the DNC is already in overdrive trying to fundraise for 2022. So, I don't think they care about
Fundraising for 2022.
Yeah, one of the
How
things.
fabulous.
Yeah, one of the things that is interesting with all of that is Empire Files did a video, I think a year and a half ago or thereabouts, about the fact that the transparency that was introduced around committees and what's happening in committees basically empowered the donors and the lobbyists to an incredible extent, because they knew exactly where everybody in the committee was standing, and they could use their pressure to knock them off or support them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
That's an excellent bit from the Empire Files that people ought to have a look at.
Oh, yeah. Which one was that? That wasn't the Giants thing, was it? The Who Rules the
It wasn't
World
the
thing?
Giants thing. It was about the changes in the electoral, in the way Parliament functioned, where up till that point, committee stage, that a lot of the bills are actually already decided before they get to the floor.
Oh, yeah.
And they're decided in committee stage. But committee stages were private.
Right.
So you didn't know what people were going. So people would, donors would come and try and influence a congressman, and they would go into committee, and they would tell the donors, oh, yeah, we'll support you. And they would go in there and say no. And then they'd come out and say, oh, I couldn't do anything about it. The vote went against us.
Oh.
And they could get away with that.
Oh.
But when they made it transparent, then the people who actually follow all of the detail of all of the bills and
Right.
have influence on it and that kind of thing are these donors and lobbyists and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
They will actually write legislation and give it to people to use. And they know whether they're actually following their promises and speaking up in committee now.
Right.
or not.
I was just laughing at what Holly was saying. He was holding that Bible upside down. That's funny.
Well, that was probably Tom, the right way around for him.
And yeah, right. Cross, and Tom was saying, did he write about the 13 colonies? The receding numbers on the right have resulted in the most undemocratic aspects of the government, the Senate, the courts, and the state legislators that can be bought on the cheap. You know a lot more about that than I do, Tom. And by the way, just for anybody that's come in recently, although we're highlighting Donald Trump and the GOP, that does not mean we think the GOP is some sort of like the Democratic Party is some kind of lesser evil thing. We don't buy into that nonsense. It's just one big party.
In fact, I think the Democrats love the GOP because they do bugger all when they're in power, and they love it when the GOP gets in because they can put in all the draconian shit that the Democrats don't want to do.
Yeah.
And they usually support them.
And Jean was saying earlier, Rachel Maddow gets people frantic and filled with fear. For sure, she must be very excited at the thought of him getting in again.
Oh, she can Russiagate again.
She'll be able. They'll be able to invent another 4 years of drama and whatever. Yeah. Is there any? I'm sorry if I've missed some other comments from earlier. Hi, Michael. So I'll just play some more of this.
The future, I think they care about keeping power. Unfortunately, while they're in power, you know, they of course can make the excuse, well, we only have a 50-50 Senate, not a big House majority. I mean, they had a pretty big supermajority with Obama. We had similar things happen with watering down things, the stimulus, for example, in 2009. But I don't think the Democrats get this direct threat. I think, frankly, Republicans, as we've already talked about today, are a lot more willing to go to the mat and scorched earth, even if it's villainous and just immoral. And I don't think the Democrats quite understand that.
I think Jordan's being way too kind with the Democrats. I think they would have to be stupid to not realize the threat of Donald Trump. Surely they can't be that stupid. They can't be, can they? Can they, Didi? I mean,
no,
they cannot. No, I mean, they cannot possibly be.
I think it's one of those things, the tactical thing that, you know, well, if you don't go for the lesser of evils, you'll get the greater of evils. But the thing is, if the lesser of evil model, whatever happens, you're going to get evil.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And I've got a little cat in my lap, and every time I move my head, this little wire moves, and he wants to grab it. Anyway, we'll just continue on with this.
Well, you and I both agree that unless the Democrats deliver for their people, the working people, finally, after 40 years of neoliberalism, where we saw Clinton and Obama act no better than the Republicans. And actually, it's their neoliberalism that led to Trump, basically. I mean, look at everything that Clinton did. You know, if it was a Republican, they would never have let him do it, whether it was NAFTA, outsourcing all those high-paying jobs, or deregulating the banks, or deregulating the media, you know, or whatever he was trying to do. He was actually working on cutting Social Security and Medicare when the Lewinsky scandal popped up. I mean, it was only because of that he stopped that nefarious plan. And we, of course, know what Obama did, pushing the TPP, which would have been NAFTA on steroids during the election, you know, causing Hillary's demise. Well, a lot of things caused Hillary's demise, except for the things that she thought, which were Bernie and Comey and, you know, Russia.
Yeah, that's so true. Hillary Clinton grasping at straws to excuse her demise. But anyway, so we've actually got a little bit more toward the end where I've read out. I've actually Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say that whole thing with Hillary Clinton grasping at the demise. I mean, they threw WikiLeaks under the bus with their they hacked the thing.
Yeah,
they released those, but and completely ignored the fact that what the tapes revealed.
Yeah. What all the files that were released and all of that. The political corruption and all of that.
Corruption.
I know. Yeah.
Within that party.
Truly amazing.
Yeah.
Still haven't addressed that.
And the fact that Clinton was just a warmongering.
What did she write? What was that book she wrote? What Went Wrong or something?
I don't know.
What went wrong?
She went wrong.
Anyway, let me see.
The United States is heading into.
I've just pre-recorded some of this article, and I don't know how much more we have to say because Lauren actually and Jordan covered that very well. But we'll play some of that. The United States is heading into its greatest political and constitutional crisis since the Civil War, with a reasonable chance over the next 3 or 4 years of incidents of mass violence, a breakdown of federal authority, and the division of the country into warring red and blue enclaves. The warning signs may be obscured by the distraction of politics, the pandemic, the economy, and global crisis, and by wishful thinking and denial. But about these things there should be no doubt. First, Donald Trump will be the Republican candidate for president in 2024. The hope and expectation that he would fade in visibility and influence have been delusional. He enjoys mammoth leads in the polls. He is building a massive campaign war chest, and at this moment the Democratic ticket looks vulnerable. Barring health problems, he is running. Second, Trump and his Republican allies are actively preparing to ensure his victory by whatever means necessary. Trump's charges of fraud in the 2020 election are now primarily aimed at establishing the predicate to challenge future election results that do not go his way. Some Republican candidates have already begun preparing to declare fraud in 2022, just as Larry Elder tried meekly to do in the California recall contest. So that'll be fun because we've already been through the whole Stop the Steal thing, and certain leftists, certain journalists who say they're on the left spend a lot of time doing this, highlighting the Stop the Steal thing. But I mean, it's going to happen. They're already preparing to declare fraud. Jesus, it's just never ending. The shit show is never ending. We've got another section. It just gets worse. What?
It's really just the rise of fascism.
Yeah.
And it's implementing it. I mean, Hitler didn't happen instantly. He ended up swaying more and more people in that way until they gave him power.
Yeah, and Jean was saying, the climate crisis, the destruction of ecosystems, and the early events of climate collapse is happening at the same time. Exactly. There's this whole spectacle and shit show happening, and also COVID is another great distraction too. I mean, it's a very serious thing, and it's a pandemic, but that's also keeping people so tied up, particularly because the government has governments in general have mismanaged a lot of this, the whole thing. That this is all keeping everybody distracted from the real imminent, sort of possible extinction event of our species and most other species on the planet, the climate catastrophe with this conservative estimate of 2.7. That's if there is no feedback loops happening. I mean, it's sort of like you couldn't, and this is something I've said to Dee before, like if somebody would have said to me 40 years ago that this is what we would be doing when we were in this dire situation where we're on the edge of extinction, and this is the kind of people we have. We're like people trapped in a bus with some kind of terrorist driving the bus, and it's like you can't get off the bus, and there's people arguing and playing games and shit, or you could just call it the Titanic. I mean, trying to turn the Titanic around. It takes a lot of time to turn a massive
when it's
Titanic.
Filling with water.
Yeah, especially when it's filling with water. And if somebody would have said, that this was what was 40 years ago when I was around 20 years old, if they would have said this was going to be happening right now, I would not have believed it. I couldn't have imagined that we could be so inept and incapable of addressing a serious situation. And I'm talking too about people in power, that even though we're on the verge of extinction, this is the sort of nonsense we're going on with. We've got imbeciles and psychopaths running the show, and we're like hostages on a fucking bus or a train, aren't we, Didi?
Yeah. And just to throw in a little bit of Australiana for anybody.
Yeah.
We've just had the Premier of New South Wales has just resign.
Yeah.
And I think she's been forced to resign.
Yeah.
And they say it's a corruption thing, but she's being replaced by somebody who's what do they call her? A lockdown cynic.
Yeah, lockdown
Basically,
cynic.
Our evangelical leadership, federal leadership, probably put pressure on the state Conservative Party to get rid of her.
Yeah.
Because they want to open everything up.
She's the Premier of New South Wales, and when I heard that she had resigned, I thought, I bet you that they've kept that little, that she was involved in some corruption. They've kept that little, sort of nut, sort of stored away for when it was convenient to bring it out, because they don't care about corruption in Australia. Politicians don't care about corruption.
There's so many
So they
scandals
kept that little nugget waiting there to bring it out because they wanted to. Because New South Wales, they want to open it up, and she wasn't doing it fast enough, so they brought it out, and now she's had to resign, and then they're going to put in somebody who is against lockdowns and all that kind of stuff and isn't. So anyway, it's just sort of like a typical thing. It happens all over the world. When these kinds of things happen, you just know there's something sort of nefarious in the wings. But anyway, we'll just play some more of this. What's that, Dean?
I just wanted to say, Jean said, I thought this was the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Little laugh at that.
Yeah, good one.
Yes.
Buster will seem quaint in 3 years if the American political system enters a crisis for which the Constitution offers no remedy. Most Americans, and all but a handful of politicians, have refused to take this possibility seriously enough to try to prevent it. And as has so often been the case in all other countries where fascist leaders arise, their would-be opponents are paralysed in confusion and amazement at this charismatic authoritarian. They have followed the standard model of appeasement, which always... Charismatic authoritarian, please.
Well, he is that.
What, Donald Trump?
Donald Trump.
I wouldn't call him charismatic. He's just like the first...
He is for a lot of people.
I know,
everybody
but
loves Trump.
Look,
Trump.
He could barely string a sentence together. I mean, at least
that says
at least
something
Hitler
about the
could give a good speech.
But I mean, no, honestly, people love him. Why? I have no idea.
I know, but at least Hitler could give a good speech. Donald Trump can barely string a sentence together. Although he's got it over Joe Biden, but that's not saying much.
Well,
the political and intellectual establishments in both parties have been underestimating Trump since he emerged on the scene in 2015. They underestimated the extent of his popularity and the strength of his hold on his followers. They underestimated his ability to take control of the Republican Party. And then they underestimated how far he was willing to go to retain power. The fact that he failed to overturn the 2020 election has reassured many that the American system remains secure, though it could easily have gone the other way. If Biden had not been safely ahead in all 4 states where the vote was close, if Trump had been more competent and more in control of the decision makers in this administration, Congress and the states. As it was, Trump came close to bringing off a coup earlier this year. All that prevented it was a handful of state officials with notable courage and integrity, and the reluctance of 2 attorney generals and a vice president to obey orders they deemed inappropriate. I don't think I have anything to say about that.
I think that's true. I think, if you can't see that, what happened at the Capitol riot was basically an attempted coup. It failed because the military didn't back it up.
Yeah, I was just laughing at Tom. Tom said only in the 5th dimension, Gene, was the age of Aquarius. What did Michael say here? Well, he did work his way up within the system that had at the time, Holly. And let's see.
Weedledingle said Mother Earth will purge her infection. Whether life on Earth remains afterwards is uncertain. Life on Earth will.
Yeah.
I don't know that it will be anything we particularly recognize, but life adapts. Anyway, I think the other thing, of course, I mean, the distraction from global climate change is the big one, but the other distraction, the other thing that is distracted from is just the U.S. imperialistic shit show.
Yeah.
Its actions in Africa, and
And I don't know. I can't quite work out whether this whole thing with China is just, well, it's way more than just trying to get more people to buy, more countries to buy weapons and all of that. Like the weapons manufacturers are rubbing their hands together. It's more than that. But also, I don't know. I mean, I don't think it really depends how crazy some of these neocons, like how Doctor Strangelove they are, really, to whether we're actually going to have any sort of hot war with China, which of course will eventually turn into some mutually assured destruction. So that's another thing.
China doesn't see it as just a distraction or a thing to create weapons sale.
No, they don't see that.
They don't see it that way. But
you know how they kept, like Trump did this. He kept saber rattling at DPRK, and then everybody would be getting more weapons. Then he'd pull back. Then he'd move forward, and he kept on. No, but it's much worse than that. Of course, I mean it really is. Like they're doing all sorts of crazy things in the South China Sea. But sometimes I just sort of think, I think we're going to end up spending, if Trump gets in, it's going to be, I don't know what's going to happen actually, because weren't they afraid that didn't one general say they thought that Donald Trump was going to drop a nuke
yes.
on them?
Yes.
That's what I'm worried about.
He thought they would
if
start
he was going to,
a nuclear
if that's
war.
true. If that's true, what that general said, well, that's a real worry.
He promised China that if Trump looked like that he would warn them. They wouldn't. He wouldn't allow them to do a preemptive strike.
Well, I wonder who that guy was.
That was General Miley. It was.
Yeah, it was a General Miley. Okay. Yeah. Now there's only like two more.
There was a time when
there's only two more sections left in this article that I picked out.
Political analysts wondered what would happen when Trump failed to deliver for his constituents. But the most important thing Trump delivers is himself. His egomania is part of his appeal. In his professed victimization by the media and the, quote, elites, end quote, his followers see their own victimization. That is why attacks on Trump by the elites only strengthen his bond with his followers. That is why millions of Trump supporters...
That's so true. So there's nothing anybody can say about Donald Trump, whether it's from the corporate media or anybody, that will make any difference, I think, to his followers.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about him being not charismatic. He is. For them, he's charismatic, and there's a lot of them. I mean, you talk about American exceptionalism. I don't think anywhere else in the world would somebody like Trump get the kind of insane cultism like the whole QAnon thing, or the Dominionists saying he's a tool of God. My goodness, how on earth could anybody think that? And yet they do.
Yeah.
And we're talking not about a few people. We're talking about hundreds of millions of people.
But you see culty kind of stuff.
Like
I can't think of another word.
50% of the population of the United States.
Did he? You see cult-like kind of stuff even in live streams of different individual commentators and stuff, YouTube influencer, in quotes, people. There's cult-like stuff. I don't know about here necessarily. I don't know. We don't really have many. I'm really not familiar with how many Australian YouTube influencers we have, but in the United States, the amount of cult-like things that go on in live streams, even on the left, on the real left, is kind of disturbing to me. It seems like, I don't know whether it's because people on a subconscious level know that we're coming to an end, that people are starting to grasp onto. I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, did they do that at the end of the Roman Empire, where they sort of, I mean, this is different, of course, because the Roman Empire wasn't facing extinction of the species and stuff like that. But it's like, I feel like that we're seeking refuge, seeking refuge in celebrities and YouTube influencers could be considered their own kinds of celebrities and all that. There's all this seeking refuge in I mean, the amount of discussion that goes on about the Real Housewives of this and that, I just think it's like it's kind of nuts. You know what I mean? The amount of seeking refuge in, And if you looked on Instagram, you wouldn't think for a moment that we're heading towards extinction.
Yeah.
The kind of shit that people are doing on Instagram. So I don't know. Of course, social media can give you a complete distortion of reality. Like when we go around Tasmania, people seem quite sort of sensible, don't they, Didi?
Yeah.
But I mean, on social media, it sort of gives you a real distortion, really, of how things are in real life.
I think in some places it does.
Hi, Carl.
I think in the United States it may not. I think that they may be that crazy.
I don't know.
I mean, I keep seeing evidence of that.
I don't know. I'd have to wonder, like, you know, I mean, most people that watch on this channel are from the US and stuff. It'd be interesting, but I don't know.
Most people in the English-speaking internet are from the U.S.
Yeah, well, on this
channel.
And
so it dominates the thing. And I mean, we're just a client state. We're utterly dominated by U.S. Culture here.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll just go on with this.
Supporters have even been willing to risk death as part of their show of solidarity. When Trump's enemies cited his mishandling of the pandemic to discredit him, their answer was to reject the pandemic. One Trump supporter didn't go to the hospital after developing COVID-19 symptoms because he didn't want to contribute to the liberal case against Trump. Quote, "I'm not going to add to the numbers," end quote, he told a reporter.
And there's just one more after
For
this.
For a movement built around a cult of personality, these adjustments are not possible. For Trump supporters, the, quote, error, end quote, is that Trump was cheated out of re-election by what he has told them is an oppressive communist Democrat regime.
I mean, anybody who thinks that the Democratic Party is a communist regime is just absolutely not have a clue. And that's what they've been pushing. That was what Trump was pushing when he did that.
Chi-com.
Yeah, when he did that sort of speech, you know, below those what's the name of that Stone Mountain, the presidents on the side of that mountain,
Mount Rushmore.
that hideous thing. Yeah, he did a speech and he was talking about the communists.
That was just fascist nonsense.
Yeah, but I mean, he keeps pushing this thing as if everybody from the Democratic Party onwards are all communists. It's just insane. Anyway.
While the defeat of a sitting president normally leads to a struggle to claim the party's mantle, so far no Republican has been able to challenge Trump's grip on the Republican voters. Not Senator Josh Hawley, not Senator Tom Cotton, not Tucker Carlson, not Governor Ron DeSantis. It is still all about Trump. The fact that he is not in office means the United States is, quote, a territory controlled by enemy tribes, end quote, writes one conservative intellectual. The government, as one Trump supporter put it, quote, is monopolized by a regime that believes Trump voters are beneath representation and will observe no limits to keep them from getting it, end quote. If so, the intellectual posits, what choice do they have but to view the government as the enemy and to become, quote, united and armed to take care of themselves as they think best, end quote.
And that, you know, when Hillary Clinton said the quiet part out loud when she called, you know, Trump supporters deplorables, a basket of deplorables, I mean, that's really and truly how they, you know, and those people know that. They know how that awful party, the Democratic Party, and they know how they've abandoned a lot of people. They've abandoned black people. They've abandoned poor white people. They've abandoned, and so, you know, when she said that, she just said it the quiet bit out loud, and they probably have never forgotten that either.
No.
You know, so I mean, it's a big FU and even an FU, it's an FU to the Democratic Party, it's an FU to the GOP that have done nothing for them, yammer all through campaign things. I feel your pain, and then
it's supposedly an FU to the rich, even though Trump is one of the rich.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm not sure if there's anything after
the Trump
this.
movement
There
might
is.
not
Sorry,
have begun.
There's one. I thought there was. Maybe there's two more of these sections.
As an insurrection, but it became one after its leader claimed he had been cheated out of re-election. For Trump supporters, the events of January 6 were not an embarrassing debacle, but a patriotic effort to save the nation, by violent action if necessary. As one 56-year-old Michigan woman explained, quote, "We weren't there to steal things, we weren't there to do damage, we were just there to overthrow the government," end quote. The banal normalcy of the great majority of Trump's supporters, including those who went to the Capitol on January 6th, has befuddled many observers. Although private militia groups and white supremacists played a part in the attack, 90% of those arrested or charged had no ties to such groups. The majority were middle class and middle age, 40% were business owners or white-collar workers. They came mostly from purple, not red countries. Most Trump supporters are good parents, good neighbors, and solid members of their community. Their bigotry, for the most part, a typical white American bigotry, perhaps with an added measure of resentment and a less filtered mode of expression since Trump arrived on the scene. But these are normal people in the sense that they think and act as people have for centuries. They put their trust in family, tribe, religion, and race. Although zealous in defense of their own rights and freedoms, they are less concerned about the rights and freedoms of those who are not like them. That, too, is not unusual.
Even Robert Kagan can sort of admit that, whereas Sajar and Jetty can't basically admit that the right has a totally different outcome to what the left has. The real left wants good stuff for all, and the right wants good stuff for their own group. You know what I mean? Even Robert Kagan, who's a warmongering, can kind of sort of admit that.
What is unnatural is to value the rights of others who are unlike you as much as you value your own.
Oh, is that the end now?
The events of January 6, on the other hand, prove that Trump and his most diehard supporters are prepared to defy constitutional and democratic norms, just as revolutionary movements in the past. While it might be shocking to learn that normal, decent Americans can support a violent assault on the Capitol, it shows that Americans as a people are not as exceptional as their founding principles and institutions. Europeans who've joined fascist movements in the 20s and 30s were also from the middle classes. No doubt many of them were good parents and neighbors too. People do things as part of a mass movement that they would not do as individuals, especially if they are convinced that others are out to destroy their way of life. It would be foolish to imagine that the violence of January 6 was an aberration that will not be repeated. Because Trump supporters see those events as a patriotic defense of the nation, there is every reason to expect more such episodes. Trump has returned to the explosive rhetoric of that day, insisting that he won in a, quote, landslide, end quote, that the, quote, radical left Democratic Communist Party, end quote, stole the presidency in the, quote, most corrupt, dishonest, and unfair election in the history of our country, end quote, and that they have to give it back. He has targeted for defeat those Republicans who voted for his impeachment or criticized him for his role in the riot. Already there have been threats to bomb polling sites, kidnap officials, and attack state capitals. Quote, you and your family will be killed very slowly, end quote, the wife of Georgia's top election official was texted earlier this year. Nor can one assume that the 3%ers and oath keepers would again play a subordinate role when the next riot unfolds. Veterans who assault the Capitol told police officers that they had fought for their country before and were fighting for it again. Looking ahead to 2022 and 2024, Trump insists, quote, there is no way they win elections without cheating. There's no way, end quote. So if the results come in showing another Democratic victory, Trump supporters will know what to do. Just as, quote, generations of patriots, end quote, gave, quote, their sweat, their blood, and even their very lives, end quote, to build America, Trump tells them so today, quote, we have no choice. We have to fight to restore, quote, our American birthright, end quote.
And by the way, something kind of fascinating about the Proud Boys is, like Enrique Tarrio was went to prison about 3 weeks ago. And honestly, they rolled out the red carpet for him, and he was like the head of the Proud Boys, and he was discovered to be an FBI informant. Now, how is it that he's able to just wander around and nobody's taking retribution because he's an informant? And, you would think, if somebody is sort of, for want of a better word, ratting you out, that there would be some retribution from people, but he's just wandering around and people are being so reverent towards him, and then he goes into prison and they rolled out the red carpet and everything, and I just think how is that possible? I just found that to be really dodgy and weird. You know what I mean? That he's able to get away with that.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
All this has left few dissenting voices within the Republican ecosystem. The Republican Party today is a zombie party. Its leaders go through the motions of governing in pursuit of traditional...
Oh, one more thing. And I think he's only going to prison for 6 months or something? 6 months. He's part of trying to overthrow the government, and he goes to prison for 6 months.
For 6 months, yeah.
It's just amazing.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Stephen Donziger has been in house arrest for 2 years. Julian Assange has been in a political prisoner for 11 years. I mean, truly and really, it's amazing.
Republican goals, wrestling over infrastructure, spending, and foreign policy.
Chelsea Manning was in prison for not daubing on Julian Assange. For nothing other than that.
Yeah.
For what was it, a year and a half?
Year and a half. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Even as real power in the party has leached away to Trump. From the uneasy and sometimes contentious partnership during Trump's 4 years in office, the party's main, if not sole purpose today, is as the willing enabler of Trump's efforts to game the electoral system to ensure his return to power. With the party firmly under his thumb, Trump is now fighting the Biden administration on separate fronts. One is normal, legitimate political competition, where Republicans criticize Biden's policies, feed and fight the culture wars, and in general behave like a typical hostile opposition. The other front is outside the bounds of constitutional and democratic competition and into the realm of illegal or extra-legal efforts to undermine the electoral process. The two are intimately related because the Republican Party has used its institutional power in the political sphere to shield Trump and his followers from the consequences of their illegal and extra-legal activities in the lead-up to January 6th. Thus, Representatives Kevin McCarthy and Elise Stefanik, in their roles as party leaders, run interference for the Trump movement in the sphere of legitimate politics, while Republicans in lesser positions cheer on January 6th perpetrators, turning them into martyrs and heroes and encouraging illegal acts in the future.
I think there's one more.
The world will look very different in 14 months if, as seems likely, the Republican zombie party wins control of the House. At that point, with the political winds clearly blowing in his favor, Trump is all but certain to announce his candidacy, and social media constraints on his speech are likely to be lifted, since Facebook and Twitter would have a hard time justifying censoring his campaign.
Tom, I'll be asking you questions in a minute, so you better be ready.
Yeah.
With his megaphone back, Trump would once again dominate news coverage as outlets prove unable to resist covering him around the clock, if only for financial reasons. But this time, Trump would have advantages that he lacked in 2016 and 2020, including more loyal officials in state and local governments, the Republicans in Congress, and the backing of GOP donors, think tanks, and journals of opinion.
Actually, Jean was saying, I'm not sure they were actually trying to overthrow the government. I see it as a mob out of control with no clear plan, but I may be missing information. No, I think you're probably right, Jean. Maybe some might have thought that, but I think basically they sort of, I don't know.
I disagree. I would say that, they do want to overthrow the government.
Oh, sure.
In the same sense that the Nazis overthrew the government. They didn't actually overthrow it. They just were put in charge of it and then completely subverted it.
Well, I remember Max Blumenthal said he was around there at the time, and they were kind of, yelling at one another and sort of like real Yahoo behavior, and they didn't. You could tell they didn't really have there was some people seemed to have a clear plan, like the people that had that guy that had all the ties. They looked like, some people looked like they were really intending to do some. There will be some people,
and it will be much better organized the next time.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, there will be some people. I think there was FBI people in there. There was some people in there that were really probably serious contenders, but the rest of them were wandering around and didn't quite know what they were up to.
The thing is that you don't need to have that kind of demonstration or coup to take over the government. It's like Hitler was made chancellor. If Trump gets into power and is able to subvert the government to such an extent that they can't really get him out, then they don't need to have a Capitol Hill riot.
No.
So they don't need to be it doesn't matter whether the masses are organized in that way or not.
Yeah, sure.
Because they've structurally taken over the government.
Yeah.
And they've taken over the government. They haven't overthrown it.
Yeah. I mean, like that was a serious fight to the death that was going on. That I'm sure. Well, Michael's aware of it, and anybody who watches Status Quo stuff, they had that incredible footage by John Farina and in the hallway. And honestly, it was a real fight to the death. It was really scary. I found that incredibly stressful to watch.
Yeah.
Like there was some people. There were people there that were really serious, and they were going to get in that building, and it was going to be, and then there were other people that were kind of just being taken along. There are people there. I mean, the preppers and all of that, there's been this for many, many decades now, people always saying they're ready to overthrow the government.
But those people are not interested. They want Trump. They're not interested in overthrowing the government. They're quite happy with a right-wing government. But they see Trump
as overthrowing the government. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's...
But anyway.
And he will have the Trump movement, including many who are armed and ready to be activated again. Who is going to stop him then? On his current trajectory, the 2024 Republican Party will make the 2020 Republican Party seem positively defiant.
The thing with
Trump's disdain...
The thing with the preppers and the people, the militia type people, I mean, they keep talking about freedom and not being interfered with by government. But I mean, Trump's government is much more draconian and militarized and that kind of thing than any government that they're protesting against.
You know what's funny is, like, here they're always saying, we want to, well, isn't it the Oath Keepers that are always going on about the Constitution, and yet, the NDAA with its, you can detain somebody without counsel indefinitely and even assassinate U.S. citizens. They don't think that's sort of going against the whole, you know what I mean? Like, you would think if there was ever a time, these people that always claim they're going to rise up and, against the government, that's not enough. That always makes me laugh.
For the rule of law is clear.
Yeah.
His exoneration from the charges leveled in his impeachment trials, the only official legal response to his actions, practically ensures that he would wield power even more aggressively. His experience with unreliable subordinates in his first term is likely to guide personal decisions in a second. Only total loyalists would serve at the head of the Justice Department, FBI, CIA, National Security Agency, and the Pentagon. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs will not be someone likely to place his or her own judgment above that of their civilian commander-in-chief. Nor would a Republican Senate fail to confirm Trump loyalists. In such a world, with Trump and his lieutenants in charge of all the levers of state power, including its growing capacity for surveillance, opposing Trump would become increasingly risky for Republicans and Democrats alike. A Trump victory is likely to mean at least the temporary suspension of American democracy as we have known it.
I love the way American democracy, the little oligarchy is going there. So
special American democracy. It's exceptional. American exceptionalism yet again.
Tom said I spit my coffee all over the computer screen, Trish. So let's see. We'll just have a look at the comments, and then we might. That's really the end of the segments of that article that I thought were, it got into a bit of the weeds during that article, and some of it was a little bit too. Yeah. Anyway, so I just picked up the bits that I thought might be interesting, and I hope you found them interesting. Let's see.
Whipple Dingle says, our exceptionalism is better than yours. Well, I'm glad the rest of the world isn't exceptional in that way. I look at the United States, and almost everything they do is exceptional in a bad way.
We're exceptional over here in that we just a vassal state.
That's not exceptional, unfortunately.
I'm joking about. I mean, Australia just trots
being a
along.
Client state and a vassal and a running dog, as the Chinese say, it's not exceptional
we
at
just
all.
trot along behind the US and we take notes, we take instruction about what our foreign policy is going to be. Let's see, what does Jean say here? The problem is that capitalism and all the corruption, greed, etc. have created a huge population of people that are miserable and feel abandoned and desperate, and with reason. Exactly. Jean, and let's see. Hi, Chris. If I didn't, I don't know if I said hello earlier. And let's see. Carl said the problem if took the people that support Trump and put them in another country, I doubtful they would change. Sorry, I probably didn't read that very well. Michael said American voters are suppressed like crazy on top of a lot of people having resigned on the entire process. Can't blame them. Yes, exactly.
Carl says America does not have a democracy. It's a facade to look behind the curtain. Well, yes, really. I mean, I think we've said that pretty thoroughly earlier on.
Hey, Jean, have you listened to? It's behind a paywall, like it's on Patreon. But did you listen to straight after the January 6th insurrection thing? Empire Files. Abby Martin and Mike Preisner did a podcast about that and about it being an inside job and stuff. And it's really, really good, really, really interesting. They sort of lay out the different things and stuff, like because Jean was saying the FBI allowed this to happen because it gave the government's police state more control. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, did Michael said Jordan just went live from Donziger's sentencing. Oh wow, I missed that. I'll have to look and see what Stephen Donziger got as a sentence. If anybody isn't familiar with that case, but I'm sure you probably are, the Chevron case where he won a $2 billion
prize
for what they did with what's that? Did he?
He should have been given an award for that.
Yeah, really. Let's see. Just looking through the comments here. Yeah, and Whipple-Dingle said the NDAA makes everyone an enemy of the state, whether they know it or not. Yeah, exactly.
He also said to Michael, I think the courage to stand up to the USA is building. I think in some areas, certainly in Latin America, they're having another resurgence of, anti-US. I think in Latin America.
Oh, yeah.
But Latin America has a politically educated population, and they've been, pretty much aware of the U.S. as an imperial force that is inimical to a lot of their interests for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
In spite of the coups and the right-wing takeovers and all that.
Yeah.
They're aware that how much the U.S. is behind so much of that.
Carl's trying to wake up. And I think I missed
Nicaragua,
some of the...
all of that.
What's that, did he?
Holly was saying yes, Nicaragua too.
Yeah. I've been way behind on all that stuff. I don't know. I've been way behind on different things. But anyway, so anyhow, I think... Oh, shit, I shouldn't turn that off. I just turned something off. Hold on a sec.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's all right. I got it now. So anyway, thank you so much for dropping by. I don't know... I'm sure people in the chat could probably have given a lot more in depth than I could have. Dee Dee knows more about electoral politics than I do, like how the system works and stuff like that. I just don't really. So I'm sure other people in the chat could have given probably more sort of clarity on that. And I don't really know what's happening with those big bills and stuff, but I don't expect that much. And what did Chris say at the end here? Both the left and right feel that our government doesn't represent the people. I'm more concerned about the separation of church and state and the co-opting of radical evangelicals.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the Dominionists and that kind of stuff. They're a real issue.
Anyway,
and their backing of Trump is crazy.
Yeah. I don't know. It's kind of really scary. I just kind of it's like, it's like Carrie, the end of the movie Carrie, where you think Carrie is dead and she puts her hand up and grabs somebody's leg. I mean, that's what's happening. That's what's going to happen, with Trump and stuff. It's like it's going to be a terrible, terrible roller coaster ride with him again if he gets in, and it looks very much like he will. And I think it's something that people are going to have to prepare themselves for that. And I hope that if anybody is able to get out of the country, if you're able to get out and live somewhere else, I know that that's pretty much impossible for most people, but if you can get out, I think it might be a good idea.
When they elected Reagan, I thought that was enough.
And Dee Dee has a daughter in California, and we've been trying to encourage her to leave, and I don't think she realizes the sort of what's coming. A lot of people, they're so busy trying to survive in the United States, they don't have time to follow any of this. I mean, I'd say, even though I don't even live there, I have probably more of a grasp of the political situation than a lot of people who are struggling to just put food on the table, and struggling, they can't pay their medical bills and all of this. So, it's like a lot of people don't even realize the incredible shit show that's happening there right now, and I'd say that your daughter is probably one of them. Hey, Dee Dee.
Yeah.
So but it's like I've heard numerous people saying they wish that they could get out, and I wish that for them. I wish there was a way people could be like asylum seekers, because seriously, the ship is going under,
and
in a bad
so many
way.
nations have made it difficult for people to move from one place to another.
Yeah.
I mean, it's much more difficult. If my daughter wanted to come here, it would be hard.
Yeah, really.
Even coming from the United States.
Yeah.
Much less if she came from some other place.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us, and it's always lovely to see everybody again, and thanks for all the comments. They're really interesting. Sorry if we miss some. It's hard to kind of listen to what's happening as well as reading things. But anyway, so we'll wrap it up here, and have a lovely evening or day wherever you happen to be. And we love you all, and we'll see you soon. And I don't know when that will be. We've been doing a lot of live streams lately, which I normally do just mostly pre-recorded. And as I mentioned, hopefully someday in the future, I'll be able to do some interviews with people. A lot of the time when I play these, like that video with Lauren Steiner or other people, I would actually like to interview some of these people on these issues, But it's like that's all I can do at the moment because of our connectivity and stuff. I can't really do interviews anymore, and certainly not live interviews. But we're looking into that, and hopefully at some point I'll be able to do that again, because it would be really nice to be able to ask my own questions of different people and stuff, but we'll just have to see how that goes. So anyway, I will end this stream now. So have a lovely evening, have a lovely day, much love to you all, and we'll talk, hopefully we'll see you soon in the next few days.
And just remember, a revolution without dancing isn't worth a candle.
Good one, Dee Dee. Okay.